Um, so there are two related issues here. One is that the United States government and its various agencies recognize the power of information and of the information war. So I'd like to come back to that in a minute, but that I think is a fundamental issue here. Related to that, and the specific issue of the Afghanistan, Iraq material, but also just all the State Department material, is the United States, like any government, doesn't want its internal discussions known. And, governments have let's say, some element of secrecy. All governments do. Um, Here, what happened was that the United States was actually lying in public about particular war crimes, specific war crimes. So, for instance, there was a specific attack on people in New Baghdad city but in that attack, two journalists were killed. Now, it was very clear that the kind of helicopters that conducted the attack had a camera. It's very clear. They all have cameras, they film everything. Um, a US journalist close to the government published a book in which he referred to the footage, that he apparently had seen. And he said, these camera people were there was shooting and so on. He described the footage in a certain way. Well, Reuters, who had employed those two camera people, had for a long time asked for the footage. The US government said there's no footage. Now, in the dump from Chelsea Manning, that footage was there. And that footage proved that a war crime had been committed. And because the footage was released, soldiers, US soldiers who were on the ground, who were sensitive people, came out and said this was an outrageous war crime that we participated in one way or the other. So it's important to look. I understand governments need some element of privacy. A government is a complicated institution. I get it. On the other hand, they are lying to the public about a war crime, and so those specific instances were revealed by the WikiLeaks organization because Chelsea Manning gave them, that State Department material and so on. So that's a very important point. It pokes through in a way the not the hypocrisy alone, but also I think, let's put it plainly, these are illegal denials. You've committed a war crime, you have evidence of the war crime, and you're refusing to reveal it, to protect God knows who. So that's I think what the real impact of that dump was. Not just that we got to hear what this ambassador said to this person about this other country and the gossip and so on, who came into the embassy and met them, all that stuff. Okay, that was interesting, but the heart of it was that it actually verified war crimes. Now, United States knows the power of information war. Right now, it's conducting a serious information war against China. It's saying that China is a human rights violator, China is this, China is that. And therefore, if China is the human rights violator, the United States wants to portray itself as the opposite. It's very careful with the information war. It has been so since the 1940s. I've looked at US documents talking about the importance of psychological warfare. That's what they mean. It's the information war. But what the WikiLeaks dump did was it actually poked a hole through the campaign to portray the United States as a defender of human rights. And I think that's the reason Julian Assange had to be punished. And that's why they're so vindictive about him. They want him to die, as you saw with the revelations regarding the CIA. Julian Assange, the WikiLeaks Corporation, Chelsea Manning, each of them have poked a big hole through the US narrative that it's a defender of human rights. And that's a pretty significant thing in this great battle of ideas, where the US believes that because it controls so many of the institutions of communication, that it dominates.
So there is reportedly a plea offer that will allow Julian to go free on, as I understand it, misdemeanor charges. I understand they're also hung up on one point. I don't know what that point is. Well, yes, I was at the hearing. This was Julian's last attempt within the British system to avoid extradition. The two-judge panel asked the United States for assurances that Julian, if he was extradited, would not be subject to the death penalty and would be granted First Amendment rights, although he's an Australian citizen. Uh, if the United States offers those assurances, then it's possible that the two-judge panel could greenlight the extradition. If they do not, then it seems that he will get to appeal on these are not the substantial issues, whether it's a public interest offense or any of that is gone. But he could, on these technical issues, could appeal. So it would go back to the British courts. He, of course, is now, we just had the anniversary, 5 years in Belmarsh Prison. He's in very precarious physical and psychological health. So all of that, I don't take too much of what Biden says as important. A question was shouted at him as to whether he would consider the Australian request by the Parliament, which took the Australians a long time to do, but they finally did it. And he said it's under consideration. That doesn't mean anything really. But that, as far as my understanding of what's happening around Julian, that's where we are.
What has been the attitude of the Australian government in this regard?
Well, I think it's kind of gone on long enough. 7 years and trapped in the Ecuadorian embassy, and the only reason he was trapped there is because the UK would not give him safe passage from the embassy to the Heathrow airport. 5 years in Belmarsh on no charges. I mean, he ostensibly is held because he was didn't he laid down bail and then went into the embassy, but that's traditionally a fine. It's or maybe a short 30 or 50 days. I think I read one where it was up to 50 days or something. Well, he's been 5 years in a high security prison. So the judicial farce, which is a whole nother issue, has been egregious from the beginning on many, many points. Charging an Australian citizen under the Espionage Act, the filming of his meetings by UC Global, which was the Spanish security firm in the embassy, between him and his lawyers, and then giving all of that surveillance to the CIA, eviscerating attorney-client privilege. I mean, in the bottom line is he didn't commit a crime. So the UK judicial system, and I've covered it from the beginning, often in London, and if not online, has just had to tie itself in knots to perpetuate this show trial, which is pretty transparent, I think, to most of the public. So I think the weight of the Australian request was important, but in terms of the specifics or how it will play out, or even if it will play out, I don't know.